Oh my gosh. Welcome to another episode of Natalia Benson, the podcast. I haven't said that in a while. It has been a minute since I have been with each of you, and to say I have missed you is an understatement. And to say that I truly needed the break that I took from recording, from all of the things. Like, for those of you who are brand new, I started this podcast in 2018 with an iPhone mic. By the time I completed recording, which was just March of this year, I think we had surpassed about maybe 1.4 million downloads, which is incredible. And I am so, so grateful to you beauties for being on this journey with me. Now, as some of you know, I had to take a step back, and I'm so grateful and frankly very proud of myself for listening to that prompting, because if I had known what was coming in my life, oh man, the good news is that I had therapy this morning with my therapist, Dina. I've been with her for a very, very long time. So, truth be told, I've gotten my deepest, deepest cries out for the day. But for those of you who do not know and maybe are wondering why I've come back with this 3 episode mini series, the Saturn series, very simply, I just lost my father. And this year has been absolutely cataclysmic in a lot of ways. So, I think what I just want to say first is for all of you who reached out to me, who just acknowledged the bravery that it took just to trust myself and to say no when it just felt out of alignment and out of integrity for me to continue recording every single week or twice a week or twice a month or whatever I was doing at the time. I just want to say thank you so much. And in addition, if you are brand new to me, this is what it's like to be friends with me. Like, just dive into the deepest end of the pool, because this series is really here to reflect how much I have changed this year, but really to give me an opportunity to speak into the woman that I am becoming because of the deep challenges that I've experienced really since turning 37. So, with all of that being said, I want to give you a little lay of the land, my angels. Oh, it's so good to be back with you. I almost can't believe I'm recording and we're doing video, and these will be up on YouTube, is the plan. But very, very simply, just thanks for being here. And I'm excited to see what unfolds from these 3 episodes. So, lay of the land. This is a 3 episode mini series called the Saturn Series. I named it the Saturn Series because Saturn is one planetary representation of the Father. And also, I am experiencing my Saturn square this year. I'm 37 years old, turned 37 back in April. For those of you who maybe don't know my astrology or who are newer with me, I'm an Aries sun, a Sagittarius moon, and a Capricorn ascendant. I have a stellium in Aries, including my North Node in Aries. If you don't know what that means, well, the good news is I have a couple hundred episodes, I believe, and I've definitely talked about this, so good time to dive in. But very simply, this is just going to be a simple yet powerful, very deep, and what I hope is very healing for both you and for me series around what my Saturn square has taught me this year, and in the culmination of actually losing my dad. And he just passed away, so I'm going to be speaking about all of this. So first things first, a little update on my life this year. The truth is, it's been a special year. It's been a great year. in a lot of ways. And the power of Saturn, a lot of people fear Saturn. They they talk about their Saturn return as if it's like going to be the end of their life. And when I was in my 20s, I actually was very afraid of it. I didn't understand the Saturn return and actually what the gifts of Saturn can be. And I'm going to talk about that throughout this series. But what I will say is that Saturn has a lot of gifts to give. And that's a lot of what we're going to be discussing through the stories and through the deep dives of what I share with you here. But as a Capricorn rising with Saturn ruling my chart and, you know, less than 3 years away from my 40th birthday, what I really have witnessed as I continue to mature and get older, as I've mentioned, are the gifts of Saturn, the things that are so magnificent, but you had to work to get them. You had to just possibly burn down your immaturities, burn down your shallowness, burn down all the things that from the highest vantage point of your soul are not you. That is the Saturn journey. And I'll be very honest, my angels, you guys know I always am. So if you're picking back up with me after so many episodes, you know this. But, I this year really decided, and with the amazing mentorship of my mentor, Zach Kravitz, to let go of the podcast, to come back when I'm ready to do little mini series like this, but to really focus on Instagram and to focus on my content there. But I want to share something. I've really noticed that when I share about Saturn, almost inevitably, there are so many gripes in the comments. And understandably so. I fully get it, especially as someone with a Saturn ruled chart. But here's what's really powerful and potent. I would be amiss to not talk about the magic, the gifts, the power, and the deep, long standing success, self defined success that your Saturn placement can bring to your life if only you are willing to show up for the trials and the tribulations that your soul has set forth for you, because those trials and tribulations are there for a reason. All of that being said, I finally had a moment, um, basically about a month ago, where I was like, what the heck is happening this year? I've had some hard years, I've had some hard moments, I've had things occur just like we all have, where I'm like, wow, this is really tough to get through. This year has felt almost like you're surfing and you get hit by a wave and then the waves just keep on coming and it's really hard to come up for air. So basically, starting in the spring is when this began. I actually flew out to Detroit to do a speaking engagement. This was actually right after I completed the podcast and said goodbye for now. And when I was on that trip, I got the call from my mom that my dad was diagnosed with lymphoma all over his lymph glands in his body. And I was on that trip and I just remember being like, oh my God. It was one of those moments, and this is very Saturnian, where you're like, oh, it's hard to even put into words, but it's like, whoa, reality just kind of slammed down on me. And I was like, oh yeah, my parents are mortal beings and they will not be here forever. And what's very powerful, and I'm going to talk about this a lot through this series, is all of the ways that the universe has oracular, let's see if I can put that into a cohesive word, from an oracular sense. I was going to say oracularly. Maybe that's a word. If not, we just made it up. All the ways that the earth and the universe have coincided to speak to me. And I'm actually doing work right now with an amazing teacher. Her name is Perdita Finn. And she was talking about this concept about the earth as your oracle. And like when you walk around, like what are the signs and symbols? And for those of you who know me, you know I love the tarot and I've read the tarot for a very, very long time, going on about 15, 16 years at this point. And the tarot really teaches you that to really witness the oracular nature of how this universe interacts with us, not just in the cards, but every single day if we're paying attention. And what I will say is the moment that my mom called me, I was just about to go speak in front of about 80, 90 women. Amazing event put on by my babe, my Gemini queen, Bridget Morris, over in Detroit. My mom called me and she told me the news. And as I was sitting there, they're finishing doing my makeup. So I was like, I cannot cry right now. I absolutely cannot cry right now. But as soon as I got the news, I looked across the way. I was staying at the Shinola in Detroit. And across from my room, they're building the largest skyscraper in Detroit right now. And as I looked across, probably on like the sixth floor of this building, a white butterfly begins just streaming across the skyscraper in the middle of downtown Detroit. And it was just one of those moments where you're like, okay, I'm listening. And I had this feeling inside of me to not go to fear, to not go to pain, because that's where I wanted to go. Because I'm going to talk about my poppy here in a little bit, but we've had a very interesting relationship and it only got better, especially towards the end of my life, or I'm sorry, the end of his life. Well, I guess the end of my life as well. This will more so be, hopefully, I have lots and lots of decades, but as soon as I hit 35, I was like, oh my God, in 35 more years or 30 more years, I'm going to be perhaps towards the latter half of my life. So I was a little slip there, but yes. So for my Papa Bear, towards the end of his life, final decade or so, he and I got very, very close. So this year, I'm just going to sum this up real fast. Mold exposure, an attempt at doing IVF, moving cities, left Laguna Beach, moved to the desert, and then I lost my dad. And this thought that keeps coming up of like Saturnian energy is like, I made a decision when I went home to see my dad or at my birthday this last year, right after Detroit. Mick and I left Detroit. We went straight to Arizona and we spent time with my dad, and my mom and I stayed there for a couple of weeks. And when I was there, I was like, okay, when the going gets tough, the tough have got to get going. So I put myself on like a ritual. And so in the morning, I did EFT for about 5-10 minutes. I did my workout. I was doing Kelsey Rose's Shape app at the time. I worked out every single morning outside in the morning sun, and I ate a full breakfast. And that's a big deal for me. I've talked about before how like breakfast can almost be like a spiritual practice because for me, I used to skip meals. I'm just running on cortisol, running ragged. And that was really the beginning of this peace and this maturation with Saturnian energy because I was like, I can either let all of these things that are going on in my life, especially the mold exposure, my dad getting sick, the intensity of doing IVF, I was like, I can either allow all of these things to take me over and really acknowledge how hard they are, or like I can just take care of myself, mind, body, soul. And that was my decision this year. That was my deepest, deepest decision with everything that's gone on. So, my dad, he was a Scorpio. And what I mentioned a couple minutes ago. So, here's what's really powerful about me and my dad's relationship, and maybe some of you can relate. My dad and I loved each other. I really, really think that we probably said, I love you to one another in the course of his lifetime a million times. And we didn't have, like, my mom, what I've recognized as I've gotten older is like my mom speaks my love language. Um, my dad didn't necessarily speak my love language. He loved me, but he was very quiet. He was a Scorpio. He's from Chicago, Illinois. Grew up one of four kids. Really, I'm going to talk more about this. I'm not sure if it'll be this episode or a future one, but he decided to become a CPA because he really, well, he liked numbers. And now that my mom and I have been finding all of his writings, oh my God, the amount of numbers this man has written down, I swear to God, it's in the millions. He has tracked mileage up for his car and for his trips that him and my mom took. His golf game, all the stats of sports that he watches. Like this man, numbers, like numbers all day, and finding all these notes with all of these numbers that he's written down in his spreadsheets. Oh my God, I always knew he was like that, but I didn't know to what depth until now that he's passed, and just exploring a little more deeper, understanding my dad as the individual that he was. So I don't know my dad's astrology, but last Christmas, he and my mom and my brother came to Palm Springs, and that was one of our yearly rituals, and we would spend the holidays together. And I remember sitting at breakfast with my poppy, and I was like, he really, the reason I say towards the end of his life, he really started to open to me more is that most of my life, I feel like I sort of fell a little far from the family tree. Like, I just was very different. And especially around the age of 19, when I really began to have deep metaphysical experiences and things that were going on for me that were so far removed from my family of origin. And I just really began to change a lot. And starting around that time, my dad had always been pretty quiet. My mom, more the talker and more the one that really connected with me through communication. My dad showed he was there through service, but he wasn't necessarily a communicator. And for me, words of affirmation are absolutely my love language. So it took me a long time. I actually was at a party in Los Angeles when someone talked to me about that. They're like, oh, I just had to realize as I got older that my parent, whatever parent I think he was also speaking about his dad. He said, I just had to recognize my dad was loving me in his love language. This has even helped me with my marriage. And I sat down with Mick and I was like, baby boo, what's your love language? I was like, because mine is words of affirmation and physical touch. What's yours? And I told him the list. And he goes, well, mine are quality time and acts of service. And I said, isn't it funny because you love me through your love language and I love you through my love language, but maybe we're not necessarily loving one another through each other's love languages. So that was a breakthrough. But where that really originated was that conversation that I had and applying that to my dad and really having that breakthrough, if I'm completely honest, where I was like, okay, my dad has always loved me. My dad loves me. He just has a different way of expressing love. And when I got the mediumship session, I'm going to talk about in depth in the next episode. She said, wow, still waters run deep. Feels like that this explains your dad. And I was like, oh my God. I said he was a Scorpio. She goes, well, that makes perfect sense then. But last Christmas time, when my daddy was sitting across from me and he was like, well, babe, like, let's see if we can figure out more about my astrology. Because I've read his chart before and I was like, you are not a Sag rising. I said, there is no gosh darn way. This man is the opposite of Sagittarian energy. I was like, there's no way you're a Sag ascendant. But when I started to toggle the times around a bit, because my dad was born in 46, so it's sort of like, okay, who he said he doesn't think that they were super precise with the time. But as I started to toggle the time to earlier in the day, that's when I started to get that my dad could have been a Scorpio ascendant, making him a double Scorpio. And what I found really fascinating about like getting to witness my dad's chart, I still don't have it completely figured out. Obviously, I know he's a Scorpio sun, but I toggled to another time, which was later in the day, and gave him a Pisces rising. So the reason I share this is because number one, it's quite powerful to understand the charts of our parents. It gives us really to understand the charts of anyone, but it gives us a deeper capacity to respect and understand the differences that we all hold with one another. And what I will say is understanding that my dad obviously was also a product of his generation, his upbringing, but also that he was a very deep feeler, likely when he just had to figure out how to survive. And as he got older and he felt more stable and comfortable, I got to see these parts of his sensitivity and his communication unfold in a way that were such a gift to me. And with the help of Mick and the help of my therapist and my family as a unit, we deepened so much because there came a moment in my family dynamic where I had to be like, you guys need to stop leaving me out. Like, I'm not here to talk about, like, I don't golf. Like, I don't necessarily keep up with the things that you guys keep up with, but I can't sit here in like family dynamics and feel like I'm not being spoken to for hours. And so when I stood for myself, and I actually did that many, many years ago with my dad as well, probably in my 20s, and the thing I want to commend about my Poppy and this Saturnian energy that he held in my life was that he taught me through, and I know that our souls had such, oh my God, such a magnificent journey to take together to help one another evolve. But the thing that I honor and admire so much about him is that he was willing to grow with me. He did not make me wrong. And I have women in my life, clients in my life, friends in my life, where I know what it's like to have a parent or perhaps even a father figure where they are not willing to see your side or accept you or like evolve with you over time. And I wonder if my beautiful community and the babes who listen to this, if you guys, where you land with that, and if you have a family who has been willing to evolve with you spiritually, maybe they were already really spiritual and deep, or if you have a family that's maybe ostracized you because of this or doesn't understand you, and you sort of feel a little bit out of place because being completely honest, for a very long time, I had to like ask my dad to keep growing with me, and I had to ask him to evolve with me, and he was willing to do it. So my daddy boo and I have so many nicknames for this man. Daddy boo, Papa Bear, Scorpio Poppy, all the things. His name was Scott. So we were actually supposed to record a podcast episode. We were supposed to record an episode about money. We were supposed to record an episode about preparing for retirement and later life. And I remember I looked back in my emails to see if I ever wrote to my dad about this, and I did, and he didn't respond. And here's why I think my papa was just a very insular person. And if there's something I learned about him and like the humanity of him over his lifetime, it was that he very simply did not like telling people what to do. He was a very live and let live kind of person. And now becoming an adult, getting ready to have children, you start to look at your parents a little more objectively of sort of how they function as people beyond just your parents. But it's interesting because my mentor, my late mentor, David Solimini, he passed away a couple years ago in 2021. And what's interesting is he and I were supposed to record an episode as well, and we didn't. So this is sort of this double lesson for me where I'm like, wow, if there is someone close to me and I want to gain their perspective, even if it's just to record it on the phone and just hear their voice, like I wish so deeply that my dad and I had done that, but I'm going to share with you at the end of this episode the advice that I think he would have wanted me to share, and he has shaped and molded me so much. It took me a really long time to sort of like realize all of the ways that he influenced me and how I am so much like him. My brother actually was making fun of me. He's like, Tally, you literally have so many of dad's mannerisms. It's kind of crazy. And I just feel like when my dad was alive, I always had this thought around him that he and I were so different. And we really weren't. We really weren't. And I really realize that so much more now. So I'm going to get more into the esoteric side of this experience. And some of this, I'm going to be very honest with you, my loves. Like, I want to have a disclaimer as well. Some of this may come across very intense. So, if you are in a grief process or you feel you may be sensitive to some of the topics I'm going to speak about around death, around dying, around astrology and death, around mysticism, esoteric, the things I saw even prior to my dad's passing, the things I was feeling. I just want you to be sensitive with yourself because I also recognize and honor that for me, I feel very ready to communicate about this. And the reason for that is actually because of a mediumship session that I had a couple of weeks ago where I communicated with my dad. I actually notated all of it. I took it from my notebook and I put all of it into a Notion board because I just want to remember it. I'm actually going to see another medium soon. And I'm also communicating with my dad every single day. And he is coming through in beautiful ways, especially when I'm out in the world and I ask him to give me a sign. He is, I mean, the women he has introduced me to, it is like, I mean, talk about like moments where you're like, oh my God, this ain't it. This is not it. And I pray you know what I'm talking about. Something I want to make sure that I speak into before we continue on is I want you to be sensitive and respectful of yourself if some of the subject matter that I'm going to go into, not just in this episode, but in this series, is a little intense. I really honor that grief shows up uniquely for everyone, and I feel very, very ready to talk about my experience with this. I was listening to Tyler Henry. He has a new show on Netflix, and I'm just loving it. And he said there are some things about grief that are deeply universal for all of us. And it's that with grief, so often there are regrets. And I also want to be sensitive because some of the things I'm going to speak to, like the astrology of the moment that my dad passed, how that astrology was interacting with me and my chart, I want to be sensitive because number one, by no means is anything that I am saying, anything that I'm bringing forward, a one size fits all. Just because I had this interaction between the sun and Chiron and this and that, I've had that interaction every year for the last 36 years of my life because this was my 37th year that this occurred. So the reason I want to speak into that is because I by no means want you to take any of this as like you apply it and then you doomsday it and you think that it means something for you, whether what I'm going to talk about with the tarot reading that I gave myself before my dad passed, the astrology. So I just want to put a big beautiful disclaimer and speak deeply and almost from a place of Saturnian sternness for a moment. Do not ever, ever, ever use something I say, something I teach in a way to harm or to create fear in your life and in your psyche. Astrology, mysticism, and the esoteric are experiential, and they are guideposts for the soul to live with deeper awareness, deeper effectiveness. Do not ever use anything that I share to be afraid or apply it to your life or your circumstances as if it's going to unfold exactly the way that it's unfolded for me. That's not what it is. That's not what it is. That's not what this is. And it's certainly not why I'm sharing this. So one thing that I found really prolific, very, very powerful about the moment of my dad's passing. So the week before, my mom called me. Mick and I had just moved into our home. My mom called me, and it was during lunch, and she said, Tally, she said, the doctors just gave your dad 6 months. And I fell on the floor. I don't even remember what happened. I mean, the tears, the weeping, the unbelievable grief that was pouring out of me thinking of my dad dying was absolutely insurmountable. And it really shook me. It really, really shook me that day. But the night before, I was on the phone with my brother, and I said, Coleman, we need to say a prayer for Daddy that we start to get some clarity, because I feel like he's in like a limbo, and I know that we don't want him to go, but I feel like there's maybe something going on where we need some clarity. So my brother isn't he's quite soulful, but I wouldn't say the terms and things I use. But I was like, I was talking to my grandparents, my dad's mom, my grandmother Ruth Ann, my grandpa Herb, my grandparents Mitch and Lila on my mom's side. And I was like, listen, we need clarity around Daddy. We need a miracle. And we're asking for clarity and understanding of what's going on with his situation. And we ask for your support and for your healing if he is like truly meant to get better. And I kept saying that. Well, the next day we got that call. And I got the call from my mom, and my mom got the prognosis from her doctors. And I was just absolutely shattered. Like my heart broke into 25,000 pieces, because the last conversation I had with my dad was not the best. He was very frustrated about being sick, and we didn't really get to connect. And connection is like my why for existing on this earth. It's like all I want. It's why I do the work I do. And I wanted that connection, and I wanted that conversation. And I knew that I wasn't going to get it, because my dad, as he got sick over the last month, well, at this point, I mean, September went into a vacuum for me, but let's see, this probably would have been like July into August. He was progressively losing his voice. And we kept being like, Dad, it's okay. You just have to do your speech therapy. I mean, we were so hopeful that he was going to turn around. We just never thought in a million years that he was going to go, because he went really, really quickly. So basically what ended up happening is that day I booked a flight. I booked a flight for Sunday. And I said, okay, Mom. She goes, Tally, do not worry. Nothing's going to happen to your dad by Sunday. He still has time. It's going to be okay. And I had this feeling where I was like, okay, you're right. I hope you're right. But if I just was like, yeah, that feels right to me. And so what ended up occurring, I'm going to share a few things about this that are pretty intense. So that night, I had a conversation with my therapist, Dina. I've been with her for a really long time. She's an Aquarius. And Dina is just, I met her during my Saturn return when I was 29 years old. I was in a very, very unhealthy relationship, and she was truly one of my lifelines to create a healthier life, healthier love, a more mature relationship to men and to myself, healthier relationship to men and to myself. And basically, and also my family, because she helped me throughout time, like also help me relate and be more authentic in my family and just be like, this is who I am. I really want to connect with you. I want to have a healthier way of relating with you. So I happened to talk to her that night. She happened to be available. And I am so grateful from the core of my soul that she was available to talk to me that night. And at the end of our conversation, she usually doesn't interject any kind of advice. She's obviously a remarkable listener, and she'll give me reflections and feedback and things. But this felt different. She said, Natalia, I need to tell you something, and I want you to really hear me when I say this. And I was like, okay. She said, you have to understand from the perspective of your dad's soul, if he does not want you there at the time of his passing, you will not be there. If he does not want you there at the time of his passing, you will not be there. You will miss the passing. And I was like, but I want to be there. Everything I've been studying, everything I've been doing over the last year, everything has been getting me ready for this. Like, I want to be there for him. And she just said, you need to trust that. And something just dropped in my body. I wouldn't say it was a dreadful feeling, but it was definitely a very powerful feeling where I just decided that I was not going to be afraid of either outcome. And I would really take to heart and soul what she said. Fast forward to Saturday. I called my mom very early in the morning and I was like, Mom, I have so much going on. We just moved into the house. I'm like, how about I change my ticket to Monday and I'll come. I'm going to like pack clothes. I'll sit with Dad all week and like it'll be, I'll get there Monday. She goes, no worries, babe. 12 hours isn't going to make a big difference. I know, yeah, it'll be all good. So she and I are talking and she's progressively feeling more and more concerned about my dad, which there were things she hadn't told me, that he was no longer speaking, that there were just sort of signs and signals that he was dying, but we didn't, I think there was part of us that just did not want to, I don't want to say that it was a didn't, I think it's just more of a fear. I feel like this is a very unconscious process. But rewinding for a moment, after I got off the phone with Dina, it was around 9:00 at night, and I decided to read my cards about my dad's passing. And I just said, okay, show me just the energy around this. And I pulled the 6 of Discs, Success, the Eon card, the 3 of Swords, Sorrow, the Death card, Crossing, which my dad's a Scorpio, that's the Scorpio card, and then the 8 of Wands, Swiftness, which is a Mercury in Sagittarius. And Mercury, in its most esoteric expression, is the winged messenger between the physical and non-physical worlds. So I saw that on Wednesday night and I was like, I wonder if my dad is going to go quick. I wonder, I don't know. But I took a picture and I just said, I'm going to just remember this just to see if there's any validity. So Saturday morning when I was driving to do my errands and get stuff done before I was going to leave, I didn't know for how long, I was on the phone with my mom. We talk every day. And she was getting progressively more worried about my dad. And she said, Tal, I don't want your dad to linger. I'm afraid that if he starts to get bad or worse, that he is going to linger. And I said, Mom, I need to tell you something. And I told her the cards that I pulled. And by the way, tarot cards don't create death. Tarot cards reflect subconscious knowing. Like, can we just have a moment of silence for that? For any part of us that gives our power away. whether it's to tarot or to whatever else externally, tarot, just like any of these systems, reflect what is at the subconscious level. And that is changeable. Because I pulled cards about my dad days before, and I pulled the Prince of Wands, the Princess of Wands. Both my brother and I are fire signs, and then the Peace card and the Love card. And as I moved into my home, I began to feel a presence, a very soft, gentle, masculine type presence. And I was like, that's interesting. But I also did a lot of clearing once we moved in here. This is our permanent home. And I did a lot of clearing and a lot of intention setting. But I just noticed, okay, that's interesting. I'm just going to take note. So fast forward back to Saturday. And I got off the phone with I shared with my mom the tarot reading. And I said, Mama, I wonder if Dad is maybe going to go more quickly than we think. And she said, I don't know. She's like, I really don't know. But we kind of got off that call in a little bit of a funky type of energy because we were like, what? Something's coming. And I want to rewind again because back in July, I had a dream. I have very, very vivid dreams. Sometimes I can tell they're just my subconscious, like offloading things. And sometimes I can tell when I'm getting a message. And sometimes I can tell when they're completely prophetic because I have no emotional tie to them whatsoever. It's just information. I did that actually about someone's pregnancy that I didn't even know, and they confirmed it. Those dreams feel very different. I rarely have those. But this dream that I had back in July, the end of July or early August, whenever this was, I was in Chicago, which is where my dad is from, and everything was ice blue, gray, and white. And I noticed behind me there was the skyline of Chicago. And then I looked in front of me, and to my right was my dad. He was laying in a hospital bed. He was completely stoic. He didn't even look like himself. And he was looking out onto the horizon, and the horizon was just ocean and gray clouds. I couldn't see anything. And looking back, I realize that this was more my guides and maybe a bit of my dad as well, letting me know that my dad was on the edge of life. He was moving into this liminal space. And then 3 days later, after I had that dream, my dad went into the hospital. And we thought he's going to get better. He's going to come out. He's doing PT. We're doing everything we can. But little did we know at the time that actually was my dad's. He was on the edge of his life, and he was going to complete his time. And the beautiful poem that I'm going to read, this is actually something that's often read in hospice. I'm going to read it at the end of this episode. So I want to speak about that dream because then the week before, when I got the call about my dad's prognosis, days and nights before that, or we'll say nights, I was having like emotionally violent dreams. And when I say emotionally violent, what I mean is that I was dreaming about water rushing in anywhere I was. It would be like the ocean was rushing into the space wherever I was in the dream. I'd either be above and I could see it coming, or in one instance, I was in a gym, like an underground gym, and it came in. And of course, I woke up. But that had me thinking, like, oh my God, where did we move? Like, what are we situated on? Because this is intense. And the day I got the prognosis from my mom that she shared from the doctors, and I cried and cried and cried, rivers and oceans of tears that day. The dream stopped because I think at the subconscious level, I'd been holding all of this down, and my soul just needed a way to like communicate it. So bringing you back to Saturday, the Saturday before my dad died, I got off the phone with my mom and we were feeling very funky. And I literally started to speak out loud to my dad, to his soul. Oh my God, the light just went off. Are you freaking joking? I told my dad not to scare me while I'm doing this. Oh my God. Oh my God. I literally was feeling, I was like, oh my God, I wonder if he's going to come through. So if the light just changed in the YouTube, that's why. Okay, we're going to just keep it real. Oh my God. I can't stop smiling. I'm sorry. Okay, so basically, I got off that call with my mama and I started to speak out loud to my dad. And I said, Dad, if you are not going to get better, I free you. You do not have to stay. If you are ready to go, you can go. We love you. We are with you forever. We are never going to be apart. But you can go. It is okay. And I just felt this peace. And I just trusted that whatever was going to happen was going to happen. So I moved my flight to Monday. And Sunday, I just did chores, got situated in the house, rested, got ready for my trip to go and see my dad and spend time with him and my mom, my brother. And that night, Mick and I went out to dinner with his family. And I got a call from my mom. This is about 24 hours after I said this prayer to my dad. And I said, she called and she said, Tally, she goes, you need to sit down. She's like, your dad is dying and you need to get here. And again, fell on the floor. Don't even know what happened. And I came home with Mick. We rushed home. And I just again spoke to my dad and I was like, please, Dad, if you can wait for me, if you can wait for me, please wait for me. And I spoke everything I needed to say to him, every single thing, everything I was grateful for, everything I wanted to acknowledge him for. And I spoke it out because if there's one thing I've learned from the NDEs and the mediumship and everything that I've been learning that was preparing me for my dad's death, it is that they hear us. And especially when they are beginning to let go of their life, they are in a very, very liminal space, both between their body and between just their soul body. So Mick and I did a mad dash to get to the airport. And what we ended up having to do is we booked a direct flight. We had to switch our flights for bereavement. We ended up doing it from LAX because we could get a direct flight. And we stayed the night in LA. We drove, I just remember driving and all I wanted to do was listen to music. All I could do was listen to music. There was something I was tapping into with it. And I just let myself cry and cry and cry and cry. And basically what happened is we got to LAX in the morning. I called my mom and it was very early. And I was like, Mom, tell Daddy to hold on for me if he can. And she said, he is getting very close. And what ended up happening is I was at LAX. I actually was speaking to one of my soulmates. His name is Leo Max. He's been on the show many times. He's a Scorpio. I called Leo and I was just beside myself because I was like, I think my dad is going to die. I'm not going to see him again. And Leo, I don't even remember our conversation, but he was just there with me and I got to talk through everything. And I went into the bathroom and I called my mom. I sat in one of the stalls. I called my mom and I said, Mom, put it on speakerphone. And I just spoke to my dad and I said, I love you forever. We will always be together. If you can wait for me, please wait for me. And if you can't, it's okay. And I heard my dad just making these sounds to acknowledge me. He couldn't speak anymore. And then our flight got delayed. And I just was like angsting because I was like, I knew what Dina had said about, if the soul doesn't want me to be there at the passing. And it was very, very tough for my dad. He got a pneumonia at the end, so a hard time breathing. But they made him very comfortable and just let him slip away. And what ended up happening is the flight got delayed. And I texted my mom at 9:35 and I said, Mom, I'm coming. Tell Daddy to wait if he can. I love you. My dad, and then our flight took off at 9:38. My mom said that my dad died at 9:35. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up the time zones. This would have been 8:35 PST, but it was 9:35 Mountain Time in Boise. My daddy died at 9:35. So basically, as I was taking off from LAX, my poppy took off and released his physical form. So as soon as I got to Boise, I have to say that the 3 weeks that I spent there, the time I got to spend with my dad's physical body, saying goodbye to him, holding him, seeing that the physical form is just that, the physical form. If you've ever been with someone who has passed, it does not look like them anymore. And I could feel my dad. I actually was holding him and I was sobbing so deeply. I was by myself in the room. I asked everyone to give me a few minutes, and the bed, like literally something like, I don't know how to say what happened without it sounding terrifying, because it made me laugh, honestly. But it was like, it like jolted. And I just was like, okay, don't scare me, please. But it was just profound. And it kind of shook me out of that deep sadness, but I still had to acknowledge, like, this will be the last time I'm with your physical form. And now I connect with you everywhere. So this has been a prolific experience. And in the next episode, I want to speak about mediumship and my journey with mediumship this year, the mediumship session I had communicating with my dad that really, really helped my grief process. But before I end this episode, I want to share the advice, the financial advice that my daddy would have given you on this podcast. My dad would have told you, as best you can, to pay attention to your money, and that no matter the financial situation you find yourself in, you can always get better with money. My dad came from not having money, and he was determined to stabilize himself and create a comfortable, stable life by his own terms for my family. And I know that my dad would tell you to pay attention to your money, to show it respect, to show up for it. And I'm going to say this again, but to know that no matter what, if you are willing to read the book or listen to the podcast, to show up for your money on a weekly basis, that you can transform your financial experience, because that is what my dad did. That is what I have done in my life. And it only takes one person in an ancestral line to make the choice that they're going to heal their relationship to something that is extremely important. And as my dad passed, and as I mentioned, I recognize more and more why I am the way that I am, and even the habits and the things that I have for better or for worse, that are so my dad, especially my money dates and the things that I do to be with my money on a regular basis. So I forgot to talk about this, but speaking of Saturnian energy, I'm going to go into this in the next episode, in the final episode of this series. The moment that my dad passed at 9:35, I looked at the astrology and how that astrology was engaging with my chart. And it was Sun at 17 degrees in Virgo, which is my 8th house of death and transmutation. It also is rules other people's money. It's on the financial access. That was making a, let me think about this. Virgo. It was squaring 17 degrees Chiron in Gemini, my natal Chiron in Gemini. The 5th house is the house of children. It's also the house of creativity and love. And then my Chiron, actually, let me pull this up really quickly because I've studied this a couple times. Oh yeah, here we go. Poppy. There we go. So making a square 17 degrees. Yes, to Chiron in Gemini. And then my Chiron has been communicating. Oh man, this is a little less clear than I would have thought. I'm actually going to save speaking specifically about the astrology. I've got to look at it. The way I'm looking at it is a little too confusing. And now that we're getting to the end of the episode, I'm going to save it. But what I found powerful when I looked at the aspects, I was like, oh my gosh, the aspects between the sun in the 8th house, Chiron, which is the wounded healer. Chiron is very close to my sun. Chiron is squaring my Saturn right now. There is just literally so much going on between Chiron and Saturn, and then this 8th house and this scorpionic energy. The scorpionic energy that is the 8th house, the house of death, the house of transmutation. But like I said, we can never be afraid of the 8th house or any of that stuff because I've had plenty of transits that were making aspects exactly like that, but it didn't result in this. So, to close up this episode, I want to read a very, very beautiful piece of writing for you. It's called Gone from My Sight. Let me actually just remind myself who wrote this. Henry Van Dyke is the author. And this, I actually discovered this in the Magical Mediumship book that I read last year by Danielle Dion. It just moved me so much. I read it to my mom and my brother the morning after my dad passed away. And this is a piece of writing, as I mentioned, that's often read when someone is passing or through like a hospice nurse, because it's very, very, very special. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read this to you, and then we're going to close up this episode. And I'm so excited. I hope this has, I really made this for you, my community, and for those of you who have been, journeying with me for a long time. And I hope there are things that you're able to receive from this for your own life. So, okay, this is Gone from My Sight by Henry Van Dyke. I'm standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails to the moving breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch her until at length she hangs like a speck of white cloud just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, "There, she is gone." Gone where? Gone from my sight. That is all. She is just as large in mast, hull, and spar as she was when she left my side. And she is just as able to bear her load of living freight to her destined port. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at the moment when someone says, "There, she is gone," There are other eyes watching her coming and other voices ready to take up the glad shout. Here she comes. And that is dying. I get so many chills every time I read that and reflect on it. I will see you in the next episode. We will release very soon. Make sure you're subscribed. And I will also have a very beautiful invitation for you in the spirit of my poppy and the depth and the continuation of my work. Because one thing my dad said to me last year at my birthday dinner, he told me about when he was a CPA for his company, he would work on supporting people in enrolling in their 401k program. And he said that so often people said no, but there were a few who did. And he said that later in his life, he would receive messages from them saying, thank you for changing the trajectory of my family's life by encouraging me and educating me on doing this for myself, for my family, and our legacy. And my daddy and his Scorpio energy and either his Pisces rising or his Scorpio rising or whatever he had going on, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and he said, babe, that's what you do, but on an even bigger level. But the reason I do it is because of what he instilled in me and him and my mom never giving up on me, taking care of my life. And even though I found it annoying when I was younger, it finally stuck. Both my mom, my dad, my grandparents, my grandma Lila, my grandpa Mitch, my mom's parents, who I was very close with, they also were on me about being financially responsible. And even though when I was younger, I didn't see the use of it, I found them annoying. I'm so grateful it finally stuck. So I love you guys. This has been a pretty deep share, and I really hope that it served. And I just knew from the moment that I was processing this that I wanted to share this in the prayer and the hopes that for anyone moving through grief or who has experienced death in their life, because it is a universal experience for all of us, that you could hopefully gain something. And I know that in the depth of the next episode. So this is how I'm naming this series. So this episode was Saturn and Grief. The next episode is going to be Pluto and Death. And then the third episode is going to be Saturn Part 2. And it's going to be all around personal finance, smart habits, and self-discipline. I'm going all in on that one because there's so many things that my dad's passing has solidified and deepened for me. And I know it's part of why I'm here, both on the very esoteric level and also like the take care of your life. And like I said, like what my dad said, like to be with your finances and to really like be present with your life and what it is that you need to do to make it amazing, because you can. You can change anything if you're willing to put your focus on it. So I love you guys so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I'm so excited to see you in the next episode. Pluto and Death, Mediumship, NDEs, and Understanding the Other Side. I will also have a very beautiful invitation for you to join me for my Saturn Masterclass. We'll talk about that. So the whole theme of this series is really around Saturnian energy and deeply caring for our lives and just seeing that like, this is it, and this isn't it. But while we're here and the 4 million chance that it was that we are ourselves and our souls incarnated into the beings that we are, let's make the most of each incarnation and really, really take care of our lives with so much love and so much like Saturnian presence and power. So I love you guys. I hope this spoke to you. If you can send me a DM and just let me know how this landed, if you tuned in, if you have any takeaways, I would be so honored to hear. So I love you so, so much. Oh yeah, my Instagram, if you don't have it, is just at Natalia_Benson. I love you. Thank you for tuning in, whether you're one of my OG angels who's listened to the pod for years or you're brand new. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Papa Bear Benson, for guiding this, turning off the light. That was pretty funny. It was on my right side too, which is the side of, yeah, there's a lot of power with the right side. I love you. I will see you in the next episode. I can't wait. Love you. Bye bye. Hey, Daniel. Okay. I'll shoot one more. It won't be as long as that one.